Hello, everyone, and welcome to Virtually 2022, Nomensa's free virtual web accessibility and digital inclusion conference. It's really good to be back after our launch last year. The next 3 days, we'll see 9 sessions from some of the leading thinkers and doers in accessibility and inclusive design, sharing knowledge, best practice, and the latest thinking in this field. It's fantastic to see sign-ups from all around the world too. We hope everyone that joins us finds this conference valuable and takes lots of knowledge back into their day-to-day roles. We're joined this week by MyClearText, who are providing live captions. You can access these by clicking on the closed caption button at the bottom of the Zoom window, or alternatively, we have provided a stream text link in the chat, which I will just drop in now. All sessions will be recorded and will be available publicly online shortly after the conference ends. So today we're hosting 3 fantastic sessions. This afternoon, we have HSBC's Global Head of Digital Experience and Accessibility, Marley Fernando. That's at 1 PM UK time. And at 3 PM UK time, we have Bryce Johnson, who is the co-inventor of Xbox's adaptive controller. There is still time to sign up for those, and also our sessions tomorrow and on Thursday. So please do sign up for those if you haven't already. You can do that over on our Eventbrite page. First up this morning, though, we have Nomensa's principal accessibility consultant, Alistair Duggin, with his talk, Not All Issues Are Equal, How to Create a Prioritised Backlog of Accessibility Issues. In this talk, Al is going to show that not all accessibility issues are equal, and that considering factors such as impact on the user, complexity to fix, and relation to core journeys can help create a pragmatic and prioritised backlog. Please do get involved in the discussion in the chat. Make sure your chat settings are switched to panelists and attendees, and that way everyone can see your messages. And if you've got any questions for Al, please do submit these using the Q&A box. I'll try and get through as many as I can at the end. Finally, if there's any issues with the stream or anything like that, please do let us know and we'll work to get that fixed. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Al to kick things off.
Hello, lovely to be here. Great to be chatting to you all. So I'm going to be talking about the fact that all accessibility issues aren't equal, and we can use that fact to help us kind of prioritize an accessibility backlog. So I'll start off by kind of introducing me. So my name's Alistair Duggin. I'm a principal accessibility consultant here at Nomensa. A bit about my background. So I kind of learned my craft as a developer and how to kind of write accessible code when I was at the BBC. I was a front-end developer there for about 11 or 12 years, I think. I kind of was the kind of lead front-end developer and accessibility champion on the BBC Olympics, which I can't believe was 10 years ago. And also kind of was technical lead for the BBC weather app that we tried to make really accessible. After that, I was lead front-end developer at the Money Advice Service, where I helped to kind of rebuild their digital estate, making that both responsive and accessible. After that, really interesting project at the Treasury, working as part of a multidisciplinary team. We're working on a government service called PensionWise. What was really interesting about this was that it wasn't just a website, it was also face-to-face and calls and documents and those sorts of things. So yeah, really interesting project. After that, I was head of accessibility at Government Digital Service. I was head of accessibility there for about 3.5 years. I kind of led how central government kind of approaches accessibility. I was responsible for helping make gov.uk an exemplar for accessibility, led on the creation of the accessibility guidance within the service manual, and kind of played a key role in helping make sure that the design system was accessible. I've also been a senior accessibility engineer at Apple, and I've been at Nomensa now for just coming up to 2 years. And what I love here is that I get to work on a real range of clients, from the Alzheimer's Society to public sector like the NHS, DWP, the Charity Commission, and also private sector organisations like WeTransfer, Booking.com, and GlaxoSmith's clients. So a real range of clients. Something that I've noticed a lot in the 2 years that I've been here, whenever we do an accessibility audit, and we do lots of accessibility audits for clients, whether that be purely to help with remediation and getting a website accessible, or it might be to gauge kind of the level of accessibility capability of an organization. And what we find, so we, as part of an audit, we provide a report, and we do a review call where we talk the client through the findings. And one of the questions or one of the first questions that always comes up is like, where do we start with fixing? It's great that we now know what these issues are, but there's quite a gap between becoming aware of all the issues that you've got and then actually creating a prioritized backlog and turning them into manageable chunks and starting to fix them. So the reality is that most websites are not designed and built with accessibility in mind. And when we audit websites, we tend to find lots and lots of issues. The reality is that that's kind of just the unfortunate kind of state of the web. The unfortunate reality is that most designers and developers aren't very experienced in accessibility. The default education routes for design and developers do not include accessibility, unlike something like architecture. And it's not required by most jobs. And it's not even a requirement for kind of career progression. So the outcome of that is that designers and developers do have very little experience or exposure to the different needs that people have, and the different ways that people interact with digital interfaces. And the result of that is that it's very easy to accidentally introduce accessibility issues, and barriers tend to be introduced on every project by default. So when we do share our accessibility audit findings with clients, the reality is more often than not, they're kind of quite shocked and quite overwhelmed by the number of issues that they've got. And we've found that running a prioritization workshop is a very helpful way in helping clients to break issues down into manageable chunks and to tackle them in a more efficient, effective, and impactful way. So today I'm going to kind of talk through the approach that I've been developing and kind of like iterating with clients. But I do want to kind of give a caveat, and that caveat is the ideal situation is to avoid introducing issues in the first place, or at least to find and fix them really early. You want to try to avoid the situation where you are designing and building whatever you want, getting it tested for accessibility at the end, and then kind of being faced by loads of issues. But if you are faced by loads of issues, this is how you can kind of effectively approach the remediation. So what we're going to talk about today, I'm first going to kind of provide a little bit of clarity about what we mean by an accessibility issue. I'm going to talk about how issues vary, and that's kind of key to helping you prioritize issues. Talk a tiny bit about the different ways that you can find accessibility issues, and then kind of talk through how I run a prioritization workshop, and we'll finish with kind of some tips for success, not just in prioritization, but just in accessibility in general. So, quick sip of water. So let's start by what do we mean by accessibility issues? So accessibility issues are any barrier that makes it difficult or impossible for disabled users to access, navigate, or engage with your digital content. It's very obvious in the physical space when, for example, wheelchair users face barriers to enter buildings. People's understandings of the barriers that are accidentally placed on the web is not as well understood. When we do an audit and kind of share the issues with our clients, we tend to group accessibility issues by different interaction types. And this helps bring to life that what we're trying to do is avoid barriers for, we're trying to avoid barriers that people experience rather than just focusing on meeting a checklist because someone said you need to meet the checklist. So let's quickly have a kind of a look at a few examples of different issues. So let's start with keyboard interaction. So really common issue. One of the first things that I do when I'm looking, when I'm checking the accessibility of a website is jump on my keyboard, try and use the tab key and see if I can reach and activate all of the controls on the page. More often than not, you find loads of controls that are just not keyboard accessible. It's also really important, as well as all of the controls being keyboard accessible, it's also very common for the keyboard order not to be logical, and this can be very confusing both for keyboard users and for screen reader users. Another common issue is around when controls receive keyboard focus, it's not visibly obvious what control is currently kind of being interacted with the keyboard. And again, this makes it very difficult and confusing for a keyboard user to be able to use the interface. Another really common issue is there not being a link available to bypass all of the many links in the top navigation and the left-hand navigation. So kind of forcing a keyboard user to tab through all of these repeated links rather than them being able to jump directly to the main content, which is the bit that they're really interested in. If we move on to low vision, common issues are things like text and controls and essential icons having very low contrast, so they're very hard for many users to see. For users that are colorblind, a common issue is information being communicated purely through colors alone. And if you can't distinguish or perceive colors, you are being excluded from information. If you move on to screen reader users, there's things like the content not being read out by a screen reader in an order that makes sense. Images not having appropriate alternative text, so screen reader users are completely excluded from the information that a core image is communicating. Other kind of really common issues are things like labels and buttons, although they have like a visible label, that not being announced automatically to a screen reader user whilst they're navigating through the page. And a really common one is things that look like headings or links or tables not being marked up in an appropriate way, so a screen reader has no idea that a thing is a heading or that a thing is a button. Then there's things like kind of more complex controls like tabs and accordions not being marked up in such a way that a screen reader knows that they are interacting with a tab or an accordion. And if we move on to deafness, common issues include things like podcasts not having a text transcript, videos not having captions, and if we think about composition, things like it not being obvious which form field has an error, or the error message that's being provided being completely useless to help somebody kind of to identify or correct the problem. So I just want to call out that all these issues that I've kind of very quickly skimmed through, which are incredibly common across the web, I'm sure you are likely to have many of those issues on your website. All of those issues are covered by something called the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. That's kind of like the de facto international standard for understanding the base requirements for making something accessible. Something to call out about the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines is that it doesn't cover all accessibility to issues, and that the goal should not just be to meet the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. The goal should be to ensure that there are no barriers on your website or your mobile app, irrespective of if they are considered a fail by the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. The Web Content Accessibility Guidelines is a massively helpful tool to help you make a site accessible, but it's a tool to help you make a site accessible rather than being the goal of what to meet. So yeah, WCAG covers all of these kinds of issues, but it is only a baseline. So now that we've talked a little bit, hopefully we've kind of got a shared understanding of what we mean by an accessibility issue. Let's start looking at how they vary. So a common mistake that I see is that kind of people treat all issues as equal, which when you've got, say, 100 issues to fix, it's not surprising that people are overwhelmed and don't know where to start. But if you understand that not all issues are equal, that becomes really helpful in making you make pragmatic decisions about what things to start fixing and what things can perhaps be deprioritized and wait a bit later. So one of the first things kind of to call out is that, so I've talked a bit about the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, but the fact is, yeah, that not all issues, if somebody reviews your website for accessibility issues, not all of the issues that they find will be considered to fail the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. Some will be best practice. So when we provide reports, we make it really clear, like, these are the things that fail the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. And then we have a section at the end that kind of covers all of the best practices. Because if your goal is to provide the best experience to as many people as possible, then you should be trying to fix all issues, irrespective of if they're a WCAG fail. But if you're very compliance focused, it might be that, yeah, that your main goal is just to meet the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. So it may be that you choose to focus on the fails rather than the best practices. And this can be helpful for public sector organizations that are just trying to comply with the public sector regulations, but it's not going to be that helpful for your users because you will still have issues. So something to consider is, yeah, like when performing manual accessibility testing, the more knowledgeable a person is about accessibility, the more issues they're likely to find, but also the more insights they're going to be able to provide you to help you to fix them or to help you to prioritize them. So we've talked about, yeah, so one of the differences is a particular issue could be a fail or just a best practice. I personally don't find that a particularly helpful way to prioritize. Much better to be thinking about the degree of barrier that an issue presents to a user. And we kind of break issues up into 4 separate types. You've got those that are blockers, those that are severe, those that are moderate, and those that are minor. So I'll quickly kind of go through these different levels, and we'll relook at some of those issues that we went through, and we'll discuss kind of where they fall. So the first type is a blocker. So that is something that literally prevents somebody from either successfully accessing some content that they need, or prevents them from completing a task. So if we look at some of those issues that we went through earlier, if you've got some controls in your interface that can't be activated with a keyboard, very high chance that they also can't be activated by a screen reader and potentially speech recognition software. That is a major blocker in your interface. So that might mean that people can't follow a link to a page that they need to get to. It might be that they can't open the mobile navigation on your website. It might be that they can't submit the form. If we look at the instance where kind of core information is being communicated through colours alone, again, if you are colorblind or if you are blind, you are completely excluded from that content. There is no way for you to get that content. So yeah, so we consider that a blocker. Similar for if you are deaf and you want to listen to a podcast, if there's no transcript available, completely excluded. Similarly, if you are deaf and want to watch a video that has audio in it, if there's no audio, completely blocked. So the next level that we provide is severe, and this is where the issue would have been a blocker, but there's actually a workaround. So a user can potentially get round the blocker, but something to consider is that just because there is a workaround doesn't mean that all users will know what that workaround is. So the types of things that I would consider severe due to a workaround is, for example, if pinch to zoom has been disabled on a device. There are other ways to make text bigger on the website rather than pinching and zoom. You might have to go into an accessibility setting and increase the text size or turn on the screen magnifier, but there is a way to bypass the block. Similarly, if users are increasing the text size and text becomes cut off or clipped or hidden behind other content, rather than increasing the text size in the way that's caused the issues, you could go back to kind of normal text size and rely on magnification software or something like that. For things like text that's low, that has low contrast, there are accessibility settings, for example, on your mobile device and your laptop that mean you can go into high contrast mode, so that could help you bypass that issue. There's also the ability in browsers to load your own style sheets and those sorts of things. Then there's things like this is a really common issue where buttons don't have a label or a form label is not automatically read out by the screen reader. A screen reader user can potentially kind of explore the interface to try to find the label. So that does mean that they can probably bypass the issue, but it leads to a very frustrating experience. So we then move on to the next level. This is around moderate. So this is where an issue is, rather than leading to a barrier, it's leading to like a frustration or like a poor user experience. So I would categorize things like if you've got controls that don't receive focus, you can normally just about kind of figure out how to use the interface still, but again, it can be very frustrating. Things like not being able to kind of skip the navigation, that's going to be really frustrating, but not block you. And if a widget like an accordion, if an accordion is not exposing that it opens and closes content, or if a tabbed interface isn't exposing how many tabs are there, a screen reader user may still be able to get at that content, but it's just a very suboptimal experience compared to if it had been marked up correctly. And then finally, you've got issues that you could consider as minor. And I tend to categorize these as things that fail the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, but there's actually very minimal impact on end users. A good example of this is that there's a requirement for well-formed HTML, and the HTML to meet a few requirements. And the reality now is that most browsers are able to cope with badly formed HTML, that there's not a knock-on effect to assistive technology users. So if you want to meet the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, if you want to comply with the accessibility regulations, you do have to fix this, but it's probably, well, it's a lot less urgent to fix than if you have some controls that are not keyboard accessible, for example. Something just to call out is that the degree of the barrier can vary depending on different scenarios. So it's not a clear cut that like whenever you have an image that has no alt text, it's always a blocker. In some situations, it could be minor, it could be moderate. So a few examples here. So if you've got keyboard navigation that's not logical or is intuitive, if there's just a couple of controls that are in the wrong order, or if you tab through one or two invisible things, that's not really going to interrupt your task completion. But if the keyboard order is completely unintuitive, that could almost become a blocker. Similarly, for when if content's being read out in the wrong order by a screen reader, it depends how much content is being read out in the wrong order. As I say, yeah, with alt text for images, there's a big difference between an image communicating core content that has no alternative compared to a editorial, like a decorative image that has a inappropriate alt text. And then equally, yeah, like for kind of form error messages, there's like, yeah, so sometimes the error messages can be absolutely awful and nobody has a clue how to fix the error, and sometimes it's just a bit subjective that it's not as clear as it could be. So the other thing that I want to call out is that the degree of the barrier is very subjective. So I might say this is only moderate, but a particular user might find it really, really difficult. So even though it is subjective, it's still a really helpful tool to help you kind of prioritize. So I say kind of like, don't get too caught up on getting it absolutely right. kind of having a good guess at it, especially when you have lots of experience of like seeing people in usability testing struggle and those sorts of things. Yeah, it's a really helpful marker, even though it is, you could argue, it's quite subjective and not always completely correct. So the other kind of big thing to consider with accessibility issues is that where the issue occurs will have an impact on how much of a barrier it is to a user. So barriers, yeah, can have like different levels of significance. So the way that I like to think about it is if the barrier is kind of occurring in some core functionality. So say, for example, if somebody can't use your application, if somebody can't register or log in, if you're on an e-commerce website and somebody can't complete a purchase, this is kind of critical functionality. So this should obviously be higher priority than something that's not core functionality. So then you've got things that are kind of secondary or tertiary functionality, and that might be things like, so there might be some accessibility issues in your advert, in your newsletter, something like on an e-commerce website, the wish list functionality might not be very accessible, but if the wish list isn't accessible and the ability to purchase is not accessible, it would make sense to focus on the purchasing bit first, because that is much more important to a user and it's much more important to you as an e-commerce business as well. So the other thing to consider that can be helpful when kind of understanding issues and prioritizing them is understanding that issues occur in different layers on the website. So you've got issues that are kind of purely in the words, in the content layer. You've got issues that will be in the design layer, so that might be like the visual design, and then you've got issues that are in the code, and you can actually, once you start looking in those layers, you can actually start breaking down those causes a bit more. So if you're looking at the content layer, the issue might specifically be around the words that are used. So for example, the wording in a text alternative is not sufficient. The labels in a form don't appropriately describe the purpose of the form field. So these are things that need to be fixed by people that write the content on your website. There'll be other issues that might sit in the design layer, and that might be within the typography, it might be in the color, it might be within the interactions, it might be within animation. And then you've also got the code layer. So it might be just a problem in HTML, could be in the CSS, could be in the JavaScript, could be in or it could be in multiple combinations of these. And understanding or thinking about these layers and the causes, these can sometimes help you think about the complexity to fix them. So the next thing to call out is that issues occur in different locations on your website. Some of these, for example, might be in your base template in the header or the footer. If you've got an issue there, the likelihood is if your website has been coded in an appropriate way, that if you fix that, you'll only need to fix an issue once if you're reusing the code for the header and the footer. It might be that it's in the written content in the page. So for example, the content that a content publisher creates when using the content management system part of a website could be within the images or the audio or the video content. that can potentially help you understand like kind of where the source of the problem has come from. For example, if your audio or video comes from a third party, could be in coded components, so things like your cards or your pagination or your auto suggests, could be within your forms, could be within third-party tools such as kind of like maps or video players, or it could be in documents such as PDFs. Something to consider here is that not only can understanding this help you to prioritize and group things effectively when fixing things, but it also kind of helps you realize that when you are testing a website, you need to make sure that you are kind of covering a representative sample of pages that covers all of these different content types and different components. And a big thing to call out is when an accessibility audit is performed, it's not performed on every single page of a website. It is normally done on a representative sample. So you do need to think about, is the issue just a one-off instance that needs to be fixed where it's been found in the audit, or does it actually occur in lots of other pages on the website, and you need to kind of extrapolate the findings from the audit and making sure that you're fixing them everywhere on the website rather than just on the pages that have been audited. And that can really affect like the complexity of fixing something. Something can feel like this will be a really trivial, easy fix, but when you realize it's actually in numerous different components, numerous different pages, numerous different applications, what looks like a trivial fix can actually become a huge effort. The other thing to consider around issues is that they are introduced by different people or different roles. And again, this can really affect how efficiently you can fix things. So for example, it might be that you've got some color contrast issues, but that's it's the responsibility of your branding team for those colors, and they can be potentially very hard to convince to change the branding colors. You've got people on your multidisciplinary teams. You've got your visual and your UX designers that can be accidentally introducing issues. You've got your developers. You've got your content creators. You've also got your third-party providers that might be providing you tools or building you specific functionality or delivering content for you. And then the other thing to consider is not all issues are under your control. It may be that you do have as in-house designers and developers, but some of the issues, are in a third-party tool that your designers and developers have no control over. So the fix will need to be done by the third party. You might be in a different situation where you don't have your own designers and your developers, and you rely on a third party to do the design and the development. If that's the situation, then potentially fixing issues is going to be a lot more difficult and expensive, and it's potentially even more important to do the prioritization to make sure that you are fixing the high impact things first. I touched a bit on the frequency of the issue, so kind of considering is this issue a one-off thing that can be fixed once, or do I actually have to go and do some research, have a look at the code base, run a script or something to find out where all of the instances, or find out where all of the other instances are, and then kick off a piece of work to fix all of those instances. And the last thing, well, there are 4 things, but the last thing that I'll talk about here is around the size, how big or complex it is to fix issues. You will have some things which are like a single instance that just needs a developer to tweak a bit of HTML, so that would be a small issue. You might have something that just relies on a developer to fix something, but it requires some quite deep accessibility knowledge to fix it. So therefore, you might call that medium because it's going to take longer and they might need some support. It might be something like you've got color contrast issues, but it's actually a really big job to do regression testing across your whole site. And you've got to update style sheets in various applications, so that actually may be quite a large issue. Or you might have an issue like the website's not responsive, and to make a non-responsive website responsive and pass the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, that's a massive task, which is it is often easier to rebuild a website than to reactively try to make it responsive afterwards. So that would be an extra large issue. So hopefully that's kind of shared some of the different things to consider. Really quickly, just like I want to talk about like there's different ways to find accessibility issues, and depending on how you're finding your issues, you're going to find different things and have different knowledge about them. So if you are relying on automated testing, if that's the only testing that you're doing, the fact is that automated testing tools can only find quite a small proportion of issues. So you might just fix the issues that your automated tool has found. But unfortunately, the reality is you're going to have lots of other issues that you're not aware of because automated tools can't find all issues. So definitely the most effective way to find all of your issues is to get somebody with really good knowledge of accessibility and accessibility testing to check your website against the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, but also to be taking into account different best practices and those sorts of things, and testing on a good representative sample of pages. The other way to test is kind of testing with assistive technologies, and this can be really helpful for testing some of your key journeys. So rather than like with the guideline testing, you tend to look at a page and see what the problems are with the page. With the assistive technology testing, if you identify some of your core journeys, such as logging in and applying for a benefit, or finding an item of clothing, put it in your shopping basket and buying it, if you're trying that with different assistive technology like screen readers, speech recognition software, that's a really helpful way to kind of find kind of major barriers that should be prioritized for fixing. Another way to find issues is usability testing with people with disabilities. This is a brilliant way to kind of understand how much of a barrier an issue is, and it's a brilliant way to get buy-in, because when people see people struggling, you're much more likely to kind of get people on board and caring and trying to fix things. But the downside of usability testing is that it's quite time consuming. So doing usability testing, you can only test a very small proportion or part of your website or your digital estate. So if you were going to pick just one way to do some testing, the most effective way would be to do some testing against guidelines on a representative sample of pages. But then if your developers aren't running an automated tool as part of their process, and if people aren't kind of checking key journeys with assistive technologies, like you're definitely missing a trick. So let's talk about now, like how do you run a prioritization workshop? How do you turn like a list of 100 issues into some manageable chunks? So what I've been doing, when I run a prioritization workshop, my goal is to get a team discussing the issues, to make sure that the right people are in the room, so they can provide the right insights. For those insights and that information to be captured, and then that information used to kind of pragmatically prioritize things. So the way that I approach this is basically using a fancy spreadsheet. So I started using Apple numbers because that provides some really nice functionality for being able to kind of sort and group and provide different views of your data. More recently, I've kind of stumbled upon Notion, which unfortunately isn't a very accessible tool, but for when I'm using it for myself, it lets me get insights into the data that I can't get in other ways. And fortunately, you can export the data as an Excel file and those sorts of things. So you can get the data out into a more accessible interface. But what I will essentially do is I will move all of the issues from the report that we've created and shared with a client and capture all of those issues within the spreadsheet. I will then try to fill in as much of the data as I can. So with regard to what layer is it in? Is it a code issue? Is it a content issue? What's the level of barrier? Is it a blocker? Is it moderate? I'll also capture things like who I think is going to be the primary role responsible for fixing it. There'll be things that I can't fill in. So things like I can't fix, because I can't fill in how complicated it is to fix, because I'm not familiar with the client's kind of technical architecture and those sorts of things. I can have a stab at kind of guessing how significant the issue is to a user by thinking about, is this core functionality or not? So I can do a load of prep up front to take into the workshop and basically facilitate a discussion and get confirm that the data that I've put into the spreadsheet is correct, but then also get the room to add in all the extra data that they only know about. Couple of things to call out. You definitely want to allow plenty of time for doing this. If you've got 100 issues to go through, you want to do as much prep up front, but you're going to need at least a few hours to kind of go through things and talk about things. You really want to make sure that the right people are in the room. So ideally, you've got like the product manager for the website, you've got somebody that has very good insight about the tech, like the technical parts of the website. Perhaps you've got a lead designer and a content person, so you want them to be able to provide the insights on how complicated the thing's going to be to fix. If there are instances across the website, they may also know things like there's this project coming up in the next couple of months that will replace that bit of functionality. So perhaps we deprioritize that and just make sure that it gets fixed during that piece of work. And it's basically my job to facilitate the conversations in the room to make sure that the data gets filled in. And then at the end of that, once you've got that data, you can start to make some pragmatic decisions about priority. So for things that are blockers in core functionality, you want to fix that now. If you've got things that are moderate issues in secondary functionality, you can probably fix that later. If you've got a severe issue in some core functionality, but it's really complicated to fix, it might be that you fix it next. So I like to I tend to create buckets of stuff to fix now, stuff to fix next, stuff to fix later. And it's completely up to the people in the room to make those decisions. They know how much resource you've got available. They know what projects are coming up. They know complexity to fix. The reality is that there is limited time and resource available to fix accessibility issues. There will always be competing priorities. So that's why you want to make sure with the time that you've got, you are making the greatest impact possible. So that's why these prioritization sessions are really helpful. What's also really helpful by capturing the data in a spreadsheet or in something like Notion is that you can generate different views of the data that can help further the discussions, or can help with your fixes, or can provide you insights that you can learn from. So here's a few examples from some projects where, so this is an example at the end of a prioritization where I've created a view where you can see, so in the left-hand column, we can see all of the issues that are prioritized to fix now. We've got a second column that has all of the issues that will come next. And for your organization, next might be in a month's time, it might be in 2 weeks' time, it might be in 4 weeks' time. And then we've got the issues to fix later. You can also create different views, like because you've captured data around whose responsibility it is to fix it. Here I've got a view where you've not only got what to fix now and what to fix next, but you've also kind of captured which is the responsibility of content people, which is the responsibility of designers. So you can start to see, this is the stuff that the content team need to do now. This is the stuff that the designers need to do now. You can also, if you're kind of creating views of the data, so here we've got a view where we can see all of the content issues, we can see all of the visual design issues, we can see all of the interaction design issues, and all of the code issues. Here, this is really helpful information for helping you to improve your training, but also to see if, like, your guidance and documentation, your pattern library, those sorts of things, if these issues can be fixed within them. And here's a view where, yeah, because we've captured things like these are all the issues that relate to headings, to images, to forms, to custom widgets. And again, this can be really helpful for a developer, for example, because they may choose to tackle all of the form issues at the same time rather than breaking them up into separate projects. Yeah, so the main advantage of kind of running these types of sessions is that you're taking a big overwhelming list and you're breaking it up into manageable chunks. A few little tips that I've got to kind of help you for success. I'll whiz through these really quickly because I can see we are nearly out of time, I apologize. So a few kind of tips is, yeah, identify your most important user tasks and ensure that there are no blockers within them. These are the tasks that people are going to complain about, that they're going to get frustrated about, the kind of things that are kind of potentially going to lead to like legal action and those sorts of things. So yeah, fix the blockers in your most important user tasks first. I would say don't just focus on those things that fail the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. If you've got a blocker that doesn't fail the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, you should still focus on fixing that blocker. So just because you have identified issues and just because you have prioritized them, that doesn't mean that the issue has gone away. They actually have to be fixed. So something that's really important to do is to kind of track if issues have been fixed, and if they haven't, to chase them up. So using that spreadsheet, it can be really helpful to capture things like the status of the issue. So has it been scheduled? Is it in progress? Has it been fixed? Perhaps add a link to the Jira ticket, those sorts of things. That means that you've got a central view of all of your issues. You can see what has and what hasn't been fixed, and you can apply pressure for those that haven't been fixed that really should be being fixed. Usability testing and demoing demoing issues is a really powerful way to get buy-in from people. If you're getting pushback from your head of development about doing all the accessibility fixes, if you're getting pushback from a senior stakeholder, doing a demo of the issue, showing a video of some usability testing, probably the most powerful, influential way to get people on board with fixing things. The reality is, try to avoid the whole remediation process. What you want to be doing is you want to be identifying issues as early as possible. This means kind of training up team members in accessibility so that they know what their responsibility is, they know how to avoid issues, but they also know how to find them early. If possible, like having a design system that has accessibility built into it is going to massively accelerate your ability to make accessible interfaces. But there's a really important thing, and I've seen this with a few clients where there is this accessible design system there, but not everybody knows about it. Not everybody's using it. So a load of issues are still getting introduced. Then big tip, code reuse can save you huge effort in both implementing accessible things, the time needed to test things, and the time needed to fix things. So if you can, rather than just having a design system, have a design system that results in reusable components, so that if an issue is found, you can just fix it once in the reusable component, rather than having to fix it in every single instance that is kind of duplicated across your website. And the last tip is around using issue tracking to monitor your progress and to inform your training and your resources. So the beauty, like by doing the prioritization session and capturing all of the issues in a single place, seeing if things have been fixed or not. I've already talked about kind of using that to inform your training, but you can also, if in a year's time, you're seeing the same kind of issues still being introduced, you kind of know that your processes or your training is not working, and you kind of need to do, you can do some things to help you make things accessible more efficiently. Hopefully that was very interesting. Do we have any time for questions, Henry? Apologies, I had so much good stuff to talk about.
Awesome, thanks, Al. No, that was a brilliant talk. Super useful information in there. We do have time for, I think, probably just one question, but I'm sure if people, I know there's quite a few there, but I'm sure people can reach out to you on LinkedIn or Twitter if they want to ask you directly after this session. So I'm just going to pick a question at random. So we got a question from Mina here, who asks, could you give us a good example regarding the disabled state of input fields? And what do you think of the disabled state of buttons and checkboxes?
So I guess that's one of those things. So that's an example of something that, like, it's fine to have a disabled button that's not keyboard accessible if you just want to meet the Web Content Accessibility guidelines. But you might find through usability testing that it's really confusing for users, for screen reading users, for example. They may find having a disabled button not being keyboard accessible like a barrier. Could be a blocker, or could just be really confusing. So I think, yeah, I think that's a good example of, like, there's a general acceptance that it's okay to do this thing, but some usability testing could show that it actually introduces some problems. If you look on gov.uk within the service manual, that talks about not using disabled buttons for that reason.
Brilliant, thank you, Al. Right, that is just about all we've got time for. I know we're 1 minute over, so apologies for that. We'll be back at 1 p.m. UK time for Marley Fernando's talk, The Power of Tech to Change Lives. There is still time to sign up, so yeah, please do head over to Eventbrite to do that. And finally, I just want to do a quick shout out that our in-person conferences are back, kicking off with Collaborate Bristol on the 1st of July. We're going to be releasing our lineup a little bit later this week, but tickets are available now, and you can get these on the Nomensa Eventbrite page too. So Al, thanks again. Thanks everyone for joining us, and we will see you back at 1 p.m. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. Cheers.